So why do recruiting rankings matter? Why do team rankings matter? We're going to take you through this so that you can fully understand everything about that. Dean Legge, Matt DeBary from Dog Post, making you a smarter Georgia fan. Matt, you've covered recruiting for some time now. Why do recruiting rankings matter?
Well, it's all about talent. I mean, the coaches can be there, the program is going to be there, and the University of Georgia kind of sells itself. It'll bring in kids, but at the end of the day, the kids are what matters the most. And we see on CBS and ESPN the battles that go on the field in the fall, but some of the biggest battles between these programs comes on the recruiting trail, and we see it time and time again. Obviously, Georgia fans watching this know the 2019 recruits. A lot of them played this past year, and Georgia had to beat out the likes of Clemson and Alabama for guys like Trayvon Walker, Nolan Smith, and others. So they definitely matter. But at the end of the day, I do think people kind of take them, too seriously. Maybe Georgia's done really well. They've recruited at an elite level, but some of their classes, like the 2017 class that we're going to see. That those guys, a lot of them are going to be drafted later, I guess in 2 weeks here. But that class, even though it was ranked, before their number one class in 2018, the 2017 class is the one that's probably made the most impact for Kirby Smart and his program since. Guys like Jake Fromm, Isaiah Wilson, Andrew Thomas, DeAndre Swift, Mark Webb, Monty Rice, all those guys from that 2017. Excuse me, I think Monty Rice might have been the 2018. Actually, it's hard to remember now, but I think at the end of the day, fans remember Georgia's number one recruiting class was a big deal in 2018. Guys like Justin Fields and Braden Cox are no longer on the team, whereas a lot of these guys in 2017, and I think in this 2019 class, are going to stay a little bit longer, and at the end of the day, be more productive than that 2018 group was.
In doing this is 20 years now that I've done it. This will be my 21st recruiting cycle, but who you get matters just as much as who you don't. I mean, when you start thinking about through the years, players that Georgia's recruited or completely whiffed on, I can't remember the kid from North Gwinnett, the tight end that played at South Carolina. I think his last name was Cook. That was a great example of a kid that could have gone to Georgia, probably wanted to, but went to South Carolina instead and absolutely blitzed Georgia in that 2008 game. You think about quarterbacks. Obviously, they recruited Trevor, but they recruited guys like Trevor, Deshaun, etc. But they didn't really recruit Cam Newton as a quarterback. That's been discussed quite a bit. So the guys that you don't get, in many ways, matter as much as the guys that you do, because you are almost in this league. You are almost certainly playing against them on Saturdays. I mean, Georgia didn't really go after Tim Tebow, but Matthew Stafford was a pretty good quarterback. That's a lot of what happens too, Matt, is that the needs, particularly at quarterback, the needs are not always there's a progression. I mean, quarterbacks aren't just looking at their class; they're looking at who else is at the school as well as who else is coming. I mean, you see that even at Georgia now.
Yeah. Well, I think of a guy like Derek Brown. I mean,
yes.
Georgia's defensive line was very, very good the last 2 years. How better could they have been with a guy like Derek Brown the last 2 years? Another one, George Pickens. I mean, Auburn sure could have used George Pickens last year with a freshman, a quarterback, and Bo Nix. Georgia won that battle in the end, and he was the best freshman in the league last year in the conference. So, and he's probably going to be very good for Georgia the next 2 years. So,
but if you're, I kind of wish Dylan were on this call. Dylan covers Georgia, and he grew up in Austin, Texas. But if you were Texas, you would have loved to have had Matthew Stafford. Now, Texas in 2009 played for the national championship. So, for the time between when they won it and when they played for it, I mean, Matthew was a number one overall player in the 2009 NFL draft. They would have loved to have had Matthew Stafford play for them. Todd Gurley, North Carolina, same thing with Zamir White. I mean, Eric Berry going to Tennessee rather than going to Georgia. There are a slew of guys. You cannot sign everyone. That's why guys like Calvin Johnson go to Georgia Tech. But recruiting. Yeah. But back to our original point here, Matt, which is that you say people take recruiting rankings too seriously. I'm not sure I agree with that. I think you have to take them for what they are, which is a guardrail for where teams should be performing. For instance, you look at Texas, they should be doing a lot better than they are.
No doubt. And I think you could go back and look at Florida State and Southern Cal's class. I mean, they're not very good, obviously, right now, but I think people would be surprised at how good those recruiting classes were, while some of those guys were on the team and they weren't performing. But I do think there is a direct correlation, obviously, between recruiting and getting five-star guys and doing well. I mean, Georgia's recruiting at an elite level, and they're an elite program because of it. Georgia's a top 5 program in the country, and it's because they've recruited so well. But I don't think if you are ranked number 1 in the recruiting class because 24/7 or Rivals says you did, it doesn't mean you're directly going to win a championship, because there's so many different other variables that go into it, especially the transfer portal, where you could sign 3 5-star kids, sign the number 1 class, and they could possibly leave the next year. So I think Ohio State's 2018 class would have been a lot better if they would have had Justin Fields in it instead of Georgia. Florida's recruiting class would have been a lot better if they had signed Britton Cox originally than Georgia. So it's about getting production out of those guys. And for Georgia, you want to get as much production out of the class as you did with that 2017 class and what you're going to get out of that 2019 class. You bring the guys in, but you have to get the production out of them top to bottom. And I think that's what obviously Kirby Smart wants to do. He's bringing in game changers from top to bottom. And you do need the 5 stars to perform like it, obviously, but you also need those 3 and 4-star guys to, play with that chip on their shoulder that most of these kids do, and really take that next step. And that's when looking back, Georgia did probably sign the number 1 class, 3 or 4 years ago or whoever, and then go back and look and see it maybe, 6 or 7, something like that. But no, you need to recruit well, and you have to have that 5-star type of quarterback if you want to make the playoffs and make a push for a national championship. And that's what Georgia's doing right now. But it's not the end-all, be-all. It's not a perfect system, but the way Georgia's recruiting, we've talked about it before, they should be competing for national championships year in and year out, and that's what they're doing right now.
Matt, the only program that has won a national championship without first getting a top 2 class in the last decade is Clemson, and their path is not the same as others. They've had a couple shots at it, obviously, going straight into the playoff in the semifinals, and they've made the most of it. I think that they have shown that development matters almost as much as anything. But then again, and the haters would say they have time to develop because they're not playing as rigorous a schedule as these SEC schools. I wonder. Yeah. I wonder this. I mean, if you're Ohio State, if you're Georgia, if you're Alabama, Texas, USC, can you survive the conference that you live in without a top recruiting cycles? I don't think you can.
No, you have to have a quarterback, and I think every school has proven that now. You have to be with the times. You have to have a modern offense and be able to still have a defense that can shut guys down. You have to recruit not only, again, at quarterback, but at receiver and DB with teams throwing around. You still need to have an offensive line. You still need to have a defensive line. And then it helps to have a linebacker like Roquan Smith coming in there, a 5-star guy who can man the middle. So you have to recruit well at all positions. I think Mark Richt did a really good job of recruiting skill position guys, but not necessarily along the offensive line and other positions. But Kirby is recruiting at a 5-star level across the board, and I think that's what you have to do, especially with the resources that Kirby and this program has, in order to reach their full potential, and they're just there. They're almost there, but on the recruiting show, they're doing everything they have to do to compete for championships year in and year out, and they're doing that. Ohio State's doing it. Clemson's doing it. Alabama's done it for a long time, and Oklahoma has done it to some extent. Not necessarily, they're not bringing in 5-star guys necessarily on defense, but offensively, they do it every year. And
the Big 12
back to Georgia, they're doing everything the right way.
So just, the Big 12 and the ACC and the Pac-12, they all have a lot in common, particularly I think the Big 12 and the ACC in that it's basically Oklahoma and Clemson. There's just nothing else in the way. And those two schools have taken advantage of that. Now, Oklahoma hadn't won a playoff game yet, but they've gotten there, and they're scary when they do. But at the end of the day, you got to have the kids, man. And I've talked about this forever. This goes back to the belief that I've had since I played, basketball and everything else in college. If you don't have the kids, you're just not going to develop nothing, and that's the biggest thing.
Right, And again, going back to the development, we're seeing it from guys like Eric Stokes,
Oh yeah.
Jordan Davis, and so on. So I mean, even Monty Rice, he was towards the bottom of that.
Some of us liked him a lot better than others.
That's right. I'm pretty sure we did it over a dog post. I mean, he was a hell of a linebacker at high school, and he's been a tackling machine ever since. But Kirby's getting those 5 stars, and he's getting production out of a lot of these 3 stars that he's bringing in that people think may not, be elite type of players, and some of them are turning out to be that way.
How can we get you ready for the 2020 season? How about take a look at this video right here in the corner of the 3 guys that we think will have the biggest impact in the 2020 cycle. Dean Legge, Matt DeBary, we'll see you over on the website.